We stand for the words of our King. Our gospel this morning is taken from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 14. One Sabbath, when Jesus went to eat in the house of a prominent Pharisee, he was being carefully watched. When he noticed how the guests picked the places of honor at the table, he told them this parable. When someone invites you to a wedding feast, do not take the place of honor, for a person more distinguished than you may have been invited. So if the host who invited both of you come and say to you, "Give this person your seat," then humiliated, you will have to take the least important place. But when you are invited, take the lowest place, so that when your host comes, he will say to you, "Friend, move up to a better place." Then you will be honored in the presence of all the other guests. For all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. Then Jesus said to his host, "When you give a luncheon or dinner, do not invite your friends, your brothers or sisters, your relatives, or your rich neighbors. If you do so, they may invite you back, and so you'll be repaid. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, and you will be blessed. Although they cannot repay you, you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous." So far, our text. Please be seated. Dear Christian friends, that is a brutal hymn. As you send your kid off to college. We are in the middle of our series, Wounds That Heal. And 2 weeks ago, we talked about how there's divisions over theology and how do we handle that. Why there's so many different denominations. It's frustrating for people who just want to go to church and worship God. We're going to talk about that in our Bible study following worship too. Last week we talked about the narrow door and how there's only one way to heaven. That's Jesus. That doesn't mean that there's a small party behind it. There'll be plenty of Christians in there, Old Testament and New, waiting for you to see you. But this week we're talking about humility. And I already tipped my hand with Moses. I don't know what he was thinking as he had to write down by inspiration of the Spirit. There was no one ever more humble than Moses. Because as soon as you say that, are you humble? How does that work? Some people say that being humble means thinking less of yourself. I was listening to a guy who said it's not just thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less. I said, well, 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. I suppose there's different ways you can look at it, but humility is not something you find these days. Social media does not foster humility. Professional sports, not a lot of humility there. This is all about me, all about pride, all about likes, subscribers, all of those things. And so how do we handle that? Well, depending on what stage of life you're in, it does take a different shape. Pride can creep in, and devil jumps where the fence is the lowest. But before we talk about you guys, let's talk about what happened to Jesus. This is the first verse. One Sabbath, when Jesus went to eat in the house of a prominent Pharisee, he was being carefully watched. Does that sound like a relaxing Saturday afternoon to you, as everyone watches you to wait until you do something dumb? I don't know that you understand how hard Jesus' life was. Sure, he was God and had all kinds of powers, but remember, he lived a perfect life in your place and never once failed. And as you go through this, understand that Jesus was perfect in your place. Because I don't think anybody ever can beat away pride completely. It's a dangerous game. I think it's good to take pride in your children, pride in your work, pride in your God. But very quickly, it turns into, wow, is Pastor Fred a great preacher? And then I just crossed the line. This is all very dangerous. Well, it's time to eat. Let's go sit down. And the guest would pick the places of honor. The host, would pick the places of honor as to who would sit where. And I wonder if that happens in your house. If you grew up as a family, was there assigned seats at the dinner table? Was it kind of helter-skelter? Everybody just had to go there and it was a free-for-all, a smorgasbord, and whoever got there first got the most? Or was there some order to your home? I think it's different depending on the home, and I'm careful to not judge, but this concept of a place of honor is very real. I think you see this a lot in the Old Testament. You see this a lot in Eastern cultures. We don't speak about honor a whole lot and shame. I don't know if there is any shame anymore. What does that even mean? So humility and pride is what the focus of the sermon is, but I don't know how you could talk about humility without pride. Verse 8, when someone invites you to a wedding feast, do not take the place of honor, for a person more distinguished than you may have been invited. If so, the host who invited both of you will come and say to you, give this man your seat. Then humiliated, you will have to take the place of least important. This happens everywhere. But I think the most keenly placed that where you see it the first time is in middle school. And many of you blocked that out, I'm sure. But if you go into a school and you watch middle schoolers, they're all socially awkward. And they all want to sit, like where you sit is a big deal. Who your friends are, that defines you. That's your identity. I'm friends with Susie. And she's, pretty popular? Who knows? But it is a complete crippling mess when you watch these kids. All of mine cried through middle school. There's at least 1 year where they'd come home in tears. I'm like, what is wrong with you? I don't know. Okay, that's fine. We're going to make it through. God's grace is sufficient. Yes, even through middle school. And you get to move on. But there is something that kind of is built into this. And so this is, foot washing is one example of humility. Jesus does this on the night he was betrayed, of course. I just did a wedding where there was a foot washing ceremony. It was nice. It was beautiful. And it's a sign of the humility that you show to your spouse. Well, listen to these verses. This is verse 10. But when you are invited, take the lowest place, so that when your host comes, he will say to you, friend, move up to a better place. Then you will be honored in the presence of all your fellow guests. Now, what's the risk there? So if I go and I walk into a room and I see there's a party, and I go and take the lowest place, the risk is, what if they leave me there? What if the host doesn't come and say, friend, what are you doing? Come on up. Move to a higher space at the table. That doesn't necessarily happen in 2025. Our version of status doesn't necessarily matter as to who's sitting where as you get out of middle school. But if nobody notices you, you could stay there all night. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. His point is God notices. Your God sees your humility, and he promises to reward you for it. But people don't notice this. Why? If you are literally not trying to get noticed, you're flying under the radar, is that a risk for you? If you post something on social media and nobody likes your post, what does that mean? Is there something wrong with you? Did you have a bad idea? The online community is vicious. My kids have tried to get me to play different video games, and I said, how do you do this? Everyone is so mean. Why would anybody this isn't fun? My goodness. Yeah. Well, I don't know that we mess around with sitting at the table, but I just think there's one for guys and girls, and this is an example. Have you ever heard a guy say, I got this? Because I like to think I'm pretty smart. I could figure most things out. We live in the information age. Watch 6 YouTube videos. You should see me make popcorn. Yeah, every movie night. It's like kettle corn. It's amazing. Okay? Well, so also, this could be a problem, guys. Maybe you need help. How many of you want to raise your hand and say, well, do you ever have to ask for directions in the age of the smartphone? That's kind of died, hasn't it? If you can't find your way with the smartphone, there's other issues. But that was the old one where the guy would never stop and ask for directions. And so I wonder if the children have ever seen a map before, which is kind of sad in some ways. But yeah, that's just one example. But I think we still need help. And I've been blessed with some incredible neighbors, family members, and church members who have helped me so much. And one of the challenges is that, guys, it is very humiliating to be an object of God's mercy. But sometimes that's a place where you need to be. And when I talk to people who are older, the first thing they usually tell me is, I don't want to be a burden. And I say, you're not a burden, you're an object of God's mercy. And it is a joy for the people who take care of you, to your family, so that you're not a burden. But to get them to see that's really hard. All right, ladies, let's pick on you for a second. What happens if your good friend comes up to you and gives you a gift out of the blue, and you say, "Oh, you shouldn't have"? What does that mean? That means I didn't get you anything. Now I feel awkward and indebted because you gave me a gift and I can't repay you back immediately. Now, I'm not saying every lady or every gift is bad or malicious. But if that thought ever creeps into your head, ladies, it's dangerous. Could there be a root of pride there? And just guard your heart and accept this token of friendship with humility and say, thank you. That's not easy to do. Because if somebody does something good for you, and you just heard James go off about how when you throw a party, don't throw a party because you want something in return. Throw a party because you want to help people. Invite those less fortunate. That's a completely different thought than what we run through. This is verse 12. Then Jesus said to his host, when you give a lunch or dinner, do not invite your friends, your brothers or relatives, or your rich neighbors. If you do, they may invite you back, and so you'll be repaid. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind, and you'll be blessed. Although they cannot repay you, you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous. Humility calls to those that have nothing to offer. Humility doesn't need its ego stroked. Humility doesn't look for notoriety anywhere, whether it be in social media or any way that we get it. Because God promises that one day you will receive your reward in heaven. And that is such a quantum shift from our instant gratification society and from people who go viral. And to hear my children say, I have a friend that is TikTok famous. Oh, that's meaningless. But yeah, congratulations. Because that's what they really wanted. And so, the only reason you receive anything is because your God is gracious. Now, it's Christian Education Sunday, and we've talked about kids and family and the totality of it. And for me, the hard part is when you, just their whole lives. And I have never been sad to see, I have the t-shirt. I've coached soccer for 12 years, president of the Boosters Club, PTO. I announced their games. I am so blessed and fortunate that God gave me those things. But when you see the totality of it, it's just a lot to take in. Because in the moment, it's kind of miserable sometimes. Raising kids is hard. And so when you step back and you see that, and you almost miss the misery. And we're going to install our preschool director. That's a hard job. Encourage her, please. And because these children need her. And she communicates the gospel with them. This is a very real ministry of our church. And so I want you to understand that through our preschool and through parents everywhere, that's how children learn about Jesus. The very first mission field is the one in the home. Don't forget about that. Spend your time with your children and teach them those truths. You are the most important person, parent, to your children. This is Matthew 18. At that time, the disciples came to Jesus and asked, who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? We've got a pride problem there. He called a little child and had him stand among them. And he said, I tell you the truth, unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever humbles himself like this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. This lesson in humility points to children because, remember, the original question is, who's the greatest? Because the disciples had a pecking order. They're like middle school kids. I think that happens in just about everywhere you go. People want to see who's the smartest, most powerful, fastest, all of these things that don't really matter. And our God tells us that. And so we look at kids because they don't necessarily, they're completely helpless. And when they trust so completely because they have no choice. They trust they're completely at the mercy of their parents for food and shelter and all that. And as soon as God gives us the ability to provide for ourselves, I'm proud of all my kids. They're all adulting pretty well. That could be really hard to stay humble and to keep that childlike faith that has nothing to offer. And that's why God holds up a child. Because you don't raise up children, you raise up God's children. These all belong to His. And we give them to our God because He's the one who will take care of them. He's the one who will call them home to heaven. And so the greatest gift we can give to them is that Christian education, because they are heirs of the King. Dear friends, humility is hard to put your finger on, but it's very easy to be humble under your almighty God, who's forgiven you and loves you completely. Amen. Please stand.